required to bear the weight of 20 tons of stone per square meter. Above the temple, the mass of the stones is approximately 350,000 cubic meters. The dome of the smaller temple, 3,000 cubic meters of concrete, is 25 meters high. The last blocks of the facade of the small temple are put back into place. It still remains to find the exact position of the 7,700 blocks that lay between the two temples. Finally, the finishing stages of the restoration of the bigger temple. The facade is protected from fissures and the elements. It has to be made to last for centuries. Once the grooves made by the saws are filled in, who can tell that the temple had been cut to pieces? Here are the temples of Abu Simbel, ready once more to greet the rising of the sun. They will bear witness at one and the same time to the genius of an ancient civilization and to the miraculous skill of modern technology. They bear witness also to the world's will to preserve the best of its past without renouncing progress, and to rely on international cooperation in order to achieve this goal. Ever since 1960, the whole of Nubia, in Egypt and Sudan, has been a real beehive of activity. In Calabria, the government of the Federal Republic of Germany takes over the dismantling of the Ptolemaic Temple, a monument consisting of massive blocks of sandstone decorated on one side. Reliefs are carefully protected. The blocks are placed on a barge which carries them 60 kilometers further north. They will recover their exact position when the reconstruction begins not far from the new dam near the temple of Beit el-Wali and of the kiosk of Qatasi, both of which were also moved and re-erected there. The Temple of Calabria is also carefully reassembled before it is opened to the public. The problem of the salvage of Amada is different and more difficult to solve. This temple of the 18th dynasty, built with small blocks of sandstone, is notable for the painted plaster covering the sculptures. It's therefore essential to find the right solution for moving the monuments, while at the same time preserving that layer of plaster. The only solution is to move the temple in one block. France undertakes the task. The columns and the angles of the temple are covered for protection, and the solidity of the edifice is ensured by using beams of concrete both for the interior and exterior of the temple. Then the monument is separated from its base and placed on rails. The Temple of Amada, well wrapped up, takes approximately 6 months to cover the 6 kilometers to its new site. It's a delicate operation that requires constant surveillance. Furthermore, the rails available are so few that the workers constantly have to dismantle them and place them further along on the wooden bases. Now, rid of its armature and beams, Amada can be seen near the Temple of Dur and the tomb of Penut, which were also reconstructed on the same site. Meanwhile, the Egyptian Department of Antiquities undertakes the transportation of a whole series of monuments away from the dangers of the waters. Of these, the most spectacular is that of Ramses II in Wadi Sebua. First, a long lane of crowned sphinxes, then the halls. Here the task is complicated by the presence of mural paintings that a Yugoslav mission stores before transferring to a museum. By now the methods used for cutting up, dismantling, transporting and storing the blocks have been developed to a fine art. The blocks of the temple of Wadi Sebua are still stored and awaiting their transportation to the site where the temples of Maharaka and of Dhaka have already been reconstructed by the Egyptian engineers and workers. In Gurf Hussein, unfortunately, insufficient means forced them to abandon the temple of Ramses II dug in the sandstone cliff. It has since been completely submerged by water. However, the Egyptian Antiquities Department put to use the experience gained at Abu Simbel to salvage a few of its most characteristic reliefs. On a brighter note, though, they have completely rescued and transferred to the site of Amada another of the testimonials of Ramses II's glory. In Sudan, international cooperation played the same role as in Egypt. The UK, the Netherlands and Belgium have taken over the dismantling and transfer of the temples of Buhen, Semna East and Semna West, and their reconstruction near a pond symbolising the Nile in the garden of the Museum of Khartoum. During the rainy season, they are protected by a movable cover, which allows it to be open to the public all year round and enables its visitors to admire the bas-reliefs that date back to the Pharaonic Middle Empire. So, 50 nations responded to the appeal made by UNESCO, 20 of which further extended their cooperation by financing archaeological missions of excavation. Archaeologists from all parts of the world found themselves working side by side in the threatened region to explore its past. Although less fortunate in the Egyptian region of Nubia, which had already been explored by prospectors at the time of the first dam, they had remarkable results in the Sudanese region, which had remained relatively unknown until then. The discovery of the fortress of Megissa and of Buhen, made of crude bricks, provided valuable information on the military architecture of ancient Egypt. A whole series of findings is now displayed in the museums of Cairo and Khartoum, showing the importance and origin of the civilizations that succeeded each other in Nubia from ancient to more recent times. Numerous objects revealed on examination a close relationship in their ideas and execution to some of the most beautiful examples of African art. These objects and those found in Nubia testify to the fact that Egyptian civilization had spread far and wide and had penetrated deep into the heart of Africa. Superb mural paintings of the Cathedral of Faras in Sudanese Nubia were discovered by the Polish mission. For example, these two Madonnas with child, each protecting a Nubian princess, are believed to have been painted by Rouault. Sudan donated half the paintings of Faras to Poland. Similarly, Egypt showed its gratitude to the countries that had helped her. The USA was able to reconstruct the small temple of Dandur, originally situated south of the temple of Kalabsha, in the Metropolitan Museum. In the Netherlands, the Museum of Leiden now owns the northern chapel of Tafeh, which stood 50 kilometers south of Aswan. In Madrid, the Temple of Debod stands far from the Nubian sky, but it has recovered its architectural beauty that was shaken by an earthquake in 1868. Yet the international campaign to save Nubia has not yet completed its mission.
J'invite aujourd'hui les gouvernements, les institutions et les fondations, publiques ou privées, ainsi que tous les hommes de bonne volonté, à contribuer, chacun selon ses moyens, au succès de la dernière étape d'une entreprise culturelle dont le monde entier a saisi la haute signification.
There still remains a gem to save, that gem of Egyptian history that inspired poets of the last century, Philae. Philae has been challenged by the modern gods since the beginning of this century due to the building of the first dam. Every year, the island on which the temple lies used to disappear under the waters and then to emerge again in summer. Now that the new god of the valley, the new Aswan Dam, has stopped this phenomenon, the monuments are permanently submerged. Will there be war or peace between the ancient and the new gods? The island of Philae presents a unique spectrum of architectural styles. The oldest is seen in that of the statue of Nectanebo, the pharaoh who reigned in the middle of the 4th century BC. However, there is a tabernacle that dates back to the 7th century BC. The most recent monument is a splendid kiosk of Greco-Roman style, which is thought to date back to the time of the Emperor Trajan. The Temple of Isis, on the other hand, was built and extended by the Ptolemaics and the Roman emperors who succeeded them. The bas-reliefs on the elegant pillar of this temple portray several divinities related to the legend of Isis, the goddess of fertility, and of her husband Osiris, the king of the earth. Until the 6th century AD, the island remained an important centre for the cult of Isis. This then was what Philae was like when the attempt was made to retrieve it from its watery grave. Several technical solutions were suggested before one was agreed upon. It consisted of building a barrier around the island, pumping out the water, dismantling the monuments stone by stone, and rebuilding them on a neighbouring island called Agilkia. The construction of the barrier began in June 1972. The work took 2 years. First, they surrounded the island with a double barrier of steel. Then, the space between the barriers had to be filled with sand, a difficult process as the sand pits were 5 kilometers away. Thousands of tons of sand had to be transported using a hydro-powered process. In April 1974, the barrier was completed and the pumping out of the water began. This drainage operation lasted several months. Meanwhile, on the island of Adilkia, the site chosen for the temples was being prepared. Certain areas needed to be levelled, others to be enlarged, and efforts were made to convey the impression of a floating island similar to that which had made Philae renowned. By the end of 1974, the island of Philae was all dry, and the workers started removing the silt that had covered the monuments, since the island had been submerged. Fissures and infiltrations were then discovered, and the task took months to complete, but there was still a layer of silt reaching 4 meters in some places. In order not to damage the temples, the work was completed by hand. Once the silt was removed and the temples cleaned up, they regained their natural beauty. It was at the end of the last century, when the first dam was built, that Philae became the centre of a very thorough study, later supplemented by photogrammetric examinations. Nevertheless, with the temples dismantled and the foundations laid bare, archaeologists now have a new page to add to history, as it's quite possible that new examples of older monuments will appear. There is a great wealth of inscriptions on the island, some of which are in demotic writing. These are now the target of new studies. Already the blocks of stone are ready to start their trip to Antioquia. Long years of arduous work preceded that